Alright, this deck's called the Horde. The commander is Sidisi Undead Vizier. Basically, it can exploit to do a demonic, diabolic, it's a tutor effect. And the reason it's called the Horde is I might actually need all these tokens sometimes. The only other token that's not a zombie token is just an emblem token for Liliana. Mana base is pretty simple. It's 29 Swamps, Unholy Grotto, Valras Stronghold, basically just recursion to the top of my graveyard. Works with a couple of abilities so that I can draw an extra card as well. Cavern Souls, just in case I'm up against counter, but I don't really need any mana fixing in a monocolored deck, but yeah, you never know. And you know, the usual Urborg and Cabal Coffers combo that produces a ton of mana. Path of Ancestry, you know, lets me scry. It's a nice, nifty ability. Just in case, under certain circumstances, just to prevent me from having to discard when I don't want to. And Witch's Cottage, you know, during certain parts of the game, I might need an extra creature on top or to change the top card of the library for X or Y reason. This helps. Now, this is just a quick small package that tutors for any card really, and depending on the circumstances, might allow me to put something from outside of the game into my hand, depending on the play group. This is a reusable effect. I sacrifice a creature, probably a token, to search for a specific zombie. Since the deck's almost entirely zombies, that's virtually any creature, and a swamp card at the same time. And this is so that I can try and get some of the non-swamp lands, those 8 you saw. By the way, that was a total of 37 lands, right? I forgot. I didn't count. Shoot. Okay, here are my draw packages. A single draw and a Death Touch Zombie Knight. Produces zombie tokens, and I can tap 3 zombies and draw a card and lose a life. This is actually a board wipe that also has the added benefit of drawing a card for each creature that was destroyed this way, including tokens. Whenever it or another zombie I control dies, I draw a card and lose a life. This one allows me to sacrifice a creature or planeswalker, and I gain one life and draw a card. At the beginning of my upkeep, draw a card, draw a card, lose a life. This one just also allows me to ping a creature or a player, which can help out if they also have a small token strategy. Gem Palm Polluter works with a couple of those utility lands. I will cycle it, discard a card, and draw a card. Since discarding the card is part of the cost, before I draw the card, I can use those lands to put this back on top and do another cycle of making them lose 1 life for each zombie I control. So I can do this 2 or 3 times in any turn, depending on the circumstances. And then this one is one of the few non-zombie creatures, and it's only because I can easily get Ascend, the City's Blessing. And at the beginning of my upkeep, if I have the City's Blessing, I can reveal the top card of my library and put it into my hand. Each opponent loses X life, and I gain X life, where X is that card's converted mana cost. I'm going to lose a pretty decent amount of life amongst all of this, so having a way to drain them and get another card into my hand is always a good thing. Twilight Prophet's one of my favorites. I call this package the Masters of Death, simply because it just constantly boosts my creatures. I choose a color, doubles the basic land production of that color, and all creatures of that color get +1/+1. Sacrifice all my creatures when it comes into play, and then creatures I control get +2/+2. Other zombies I control get +1/+1, and I get to return target zombie card from my graveyard to my hand when I activate the ability. You know, once, because I got to tap it. And this one allows me to exile creature cards from a graveyard, so if somebody has a Reanimator deck, I can kind of screw them over and gives me a token in the process. Also gives other zombies I control +1/+1. Zombies I control +1/+1, and it produces 2 zombie creature tokens. It reduces the cost of zombie spells, Undead Warchief, and the zombies I control, including itself, get +2/+1. Mikios the Unhallowed. It itself is a non-human creature, and whenever a human creature deals damage to me, it's automatically destroyed. There are quite a few humans out there in human decks, and other non-human creatures I control get +1/+1 and have Undying. So if they don't have +1/+1 counters, then they die, and they come right back. This one says skeleton creatures and other zombie creatures I control get +1/+1 and have Death Touch. So those zombies became even deadlier. Not technically a zombie, but it becomes a zombie when I bring it into play because I say so, and it gives +1/+1 counters to those zombies. I know that's a non-bow with this, but depending on the time of the game, I won't play it, or I'll play it early on to try and wait until this comes into play. Then this one, it can be played from the graveyard, and it gives my zombies +1/+1. Unfortunately, it can't block. Door of Destinies, I'm pretty sure you might know this one, but I choose a creature type when it comes into play, and every time I play a spell of that type, I put a charge counter on it. Then, in this case, all my zombies, we get +1/+1 for all those charge counters, and some of these are going to get played over and over again, so this could make a 1/1, or those 2/2 tokens, into something like 20/20s. Then this segment is called You Can't Keep a Good Zombie Down. Gravedigger and Grave Shifter are basically the same thing. It comes into play, I get to return target creature card from my graveyard to my hand. As long as I control a zombie, I can cast this from the graveyard. I need to sacrifice it to something, bring it back. Easy peasy. Over here, I get to destroy 3 target creatures with toughness X or less, and if I pay it enough, I get to return all creature cards from my graveyard to the battlefield. Zombie Apocalypse, anyone? I can return a creature card from my graveyard, and if it's a zombie, I also get to draw a card. So, 2 for 1. For discarding a card, I could discard that one very easily. Study counter. I remove study counter and sacrifice it. I put all creature cards from all graveyards onto the battlefield, and they're all zombies. So, Zombie Apocalypse times 2. The Gravespawn Sovereign. 5 untapped zombies, or tap 5 untapped zombies. I put a creature card from a graveyard into play under my control. Some of those Reanimator decks are not going to like this. I get to return 2 creature cards to the battlefield, and they're zombies again, and then I put this on the bottom of my library. So depending on how quickly I can cycle through my deck, this can see play over and over again. The graveyard's going to be filled quite often, and this will allow me to recur them from the graveyard to my hand. This one has a ultimate ability of destroy all non-zombie creatures. Gee, I wonder if this deck favors zombies. Or I can recur a creature from the graveyard to the battlefield, and it becomes a zombie. A black zombie. Or I can create a 2/2 zombie creature token and put 2 cards of my library into my graveyard. And here's some of the token package. This is why I need that 1 emblem token, because the ultimate ability on this Liliana, the Last Hope, at the beginning of my end step, I put X 2/2 zombie creature tokens onto the battlefield, where X is 2 plus the number of zombies I control. So I get a little bit more than double the zombies. The first ability, pretty simple, -2, -1. Earlier in the game, this could be really helpful at preventing her from losing loyalty counters. Second ability, I put the top 2 cards of my library into my graveyard first, then I return a creature card from my graveyard. So if I really need something, or if I'm trying to cycle through the deck, also helpful. Now, this is a 6 convert mana cost for what essentially is a 5/5. And whenever a player casts a spell, I remove a +1/+1 counter from it. And then and that's any player, by the way, me or my opponents. And if I do, I put a 2/2 black zombie creature token into play. So essentially, depending on how you do it, it can become a convert mana cost of 6 for a total power of 10. And plus, when there's no +1/+1 counters on it, Mikios and the Howl would bring it back with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. So it would come back with 6. It gets this one, it just gets pumped and becomes bigger for each zombie I control and is in my graveyard. Oh, no, just for each zombie in my graveyard. But whenever I cast a zombie spell, I also get a 2/2 black zombie creature token. Then this one has double X in the cost. So depending on what part of the game, that's going to be really easy or just a pain in the butt. It won't even be worth it. But when it's worth it, it's really worth it. I put X 2/2 black zombie creature tokens in the battlefield. Then one creature gets -1/-1 until end turn for each zombie that player controls. So I can put it under somebody else's control if I wanted to. I don't know why, but yeah, I could. It helps me get rid of those indestructible creatures too. Now, this one could just be a 4/5 with Menace, but when I have the mana and I kick it, I get 8 2/2 black zombie creature tokens with Menace. So 4 + 6, 10 for a total of, 16? For a total of 20 power. Huh. Never actually stopped to do the math on that one. Then, Army of the Damned. 13 2/2 black zombie creature tokens. But if I can also flash it back so I can get a total of 26 if I need to. And then Endless Ranks of the Dead. At the beginning of my upkeep, not the beginning of my end step, but upkeep, I put X 2/2 zombie creature tokens, where X is half the number of zombies I control rounded down. So 2 gets me 1, 4 gets me 2, 3 still also gets me 1, and 5 also gets me 2, but it adds up. And then I call this package Classic Zombie Behavior. Shepherd of Rot. I tap it, and each player loses 1 life for each zombie in play. Hey, if I'm going to go down, I'm taking you out with me. Whenever it or another zombie is put into a graveyard, not just mine, each opponent loses a life. Grey Merchant of Asphodel, everybody knows this card, can help siphon some life and give it back to me, so maybe I'll survive this and they won't. And this gives all my creatures Extort, including itself, a little bit of Siphon, and again, one of the few non-zombie cards in here. It basically adds an extra mana, black mana to my mana pool for each swamp. This one, another life loss for each zombie that I control dies. This is just a quick life gain / exiling a troublesome planeswalker or creature card. Spot removal is pretty good. And this helps slow down my opponents, especially if I get some of the mana ramp. So, and at the end of my turn, each opponent loses a life. So it's a slow drain. Now, this is just support and slowdown, speed up. We've seen it before. I just really like this card. It doesn't really play well other than the fact that it's a zombie in itself. And just in case I have red or white players, it helps get me around. This one is surprisingly very useful. It's target land destruction. It doesn't have to be basic or non-basic. But if it's a non-basic land, I get to untap it, and if I have enough mana, I can do it again. Then over here is my Helping Hands deck. Soulless one can be a powerhouse at certain times of the game. This one, Cover of Darkness, I choose a creature type and all those creatures gain fear. Forgot how long you've been playing, Cody, but fear is basically intimidate, but specifically for black. And then I can make an attacking zombie indestructible if I wanted to. And Urza's Incubator. It helps reduce the cost of my zombie spells. It's pretty good, and if I get it early on, whew. And then this one is non-zombie hate, because whenever it or another zombie comes into play, all non-zombie creatures get -1/-1 until end of turn. And with some extra card draw, I can do something like -10, -10, especially with the tokens. It can even be more. Alright, and then the final one is just an alternate win condition. Mortal Kombat. Now, let's meet Mortal Kombat together. At the beginning of my upkeep, if 20 or more creature cards are in my graveyard, I win the game. Well, with zombies, that doesn't seem to be too hard. Well, there you have it. The Horde will be coming after you, especially if you're Nicol Bolas.